Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. It says, firing a warning shot across big tech's bows. Lawsuits and regulatory moves in the West suggest that their easy, unchecked expansion may be coming to an end. Now, here notice the two words which have been used by the author. These two words are easy and unchecked expansion of these big tech companies. And these big tech companies referring into this article are Facebook, Google, Amazon, as well as Apple. So, in this regard, this news argues that antitrust lawsuits or anti competitive lawsuits or cases with respect to anti competitive practices of Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple have been filed by United States Justice Department as well as Federal Trade Commission along with European Union. And primarily the charges are anti-competitive practices and forcing the rival out of the competition by entering into such contracts which become suicidal for such rival companies as they can no longer compete against their big tech companies whose revenue runs into billions of dollars. Now, in this regard, you should know that Government of India has enacted the Competition Act 2002 in order to regulate such anti-competitive practices, whereas the United States of America has three laws, namely the Sherman Act of 1890, Federal Trade Commission Act, as well as Clayton Act. So the purposes of the legislation enacted by both Government of India as well as United States is primarily to prohibit such anti-competitive practices which eventually forces the rival companies out of the market through competition as they can no longer compete against their bigger rivals. So it is in this regard, let us go through the viewpoints of this author with respect to these anti-competitive practices and how these anti-competitive practices actually harms the consumer at large. Further, this article also highlights that what are the explicit charges framed against Facebook as well as Google. Now we will go through these charges because then we will try to understand that how these companies are entering into contracts which is actually keeping the rivals out of competition, or rather they are merging the rivals within themselves. So in this regard, let us go through the viewpoint of the author with respect to the antitrust laws or anti-competitive laws both in India as well as United States, and also with respect to the impact of such anti-competitive practices which is being done especially by these four big tech companies. Now, the Competition Act of 2002 says that this act has been legislated keeping in view the economic development of the country and establishes a competition commission. So, two things are important, that this act has been legislated keeping in view the economic development which took place post 1990, and in this respect, it has established a regulatory body known as the Competition Commission of India. Now, the function of this commission is to prevent practices having adverse effect on competition, to promote and sustain competition in markets, to protect the interest of consumers, and also to ensure freedom of trade carried on by other participants in the market. Now, the Competition Act 2002 was based on the recommendation of SVS Raghavan Committee. Now, this aspect becomes important from your examination point of view. And summarily, we can say that the mandate of competition law in India is threefold, namely to check anti-competitive agreements, to prohibit abuse of dominance by strong companies over weak organizations, and to regulate mergers and acquisitions or takeovers taking place in the market. So, in this regard, the Competition Act 2002 of India provides for the establishment of a competition commission for the following activities. First, to prevent practices having adverse effect on competition. So basically, the Competition Commission has the jurisdiction to regulate such practices. Second, to promote and sustain competition in the markets, to protect the interest of consumers, and also to ensure freedom of trade carried on by other participants in the Indian market. So, based on this understanding of Indian Competition Act 2002, let's go through the anti-competitive charges imposed on Facebook as well as Google. Now, the website of Department of Justice of United States mentions that Justice Department sues monopolist Google for violating antitrust laws. Department files complaint against Google to restore competition in search and search advertising markets. Now, the website of United States Justice Department highlights that Google is one of the wealthiest companies on the planet with a market value of $1 trillion. And hence, Google is the monopoly gatekeeper to the internet for billions of users and countless advertisers worldwide. So, because of its monopoly on search engines, it has been stated that Google has used anti competitive tactics to maintain and extend its monopolies in search and search advertising. Further, the complaint says that Google has entered into a series of exclusionary agreements that collectively lock up the primary avenues through which users access search engines. Basically means that once you access Google, then automatically it requires that Google be set as the preset default general search engine, and hence you cannot use any other search engine once you have started using Google on either mobile devices or computers. Another set of charges includes that in many cases, Google has prohibited pre installation of any competitive rival search engine. And it is in this regard, this complaint alleges that Google has unlawfully maintained monopolies in search and search advertising by number one, entering into exclusivity agreements which forbids pre installation of any competing search service. Second, entering into other kind of arrangements which forces pre-installation of its search application in prime location on mobile devices and then make them undeletable. That is, once you have installed Google, then you cannot delete it regardless of consumer preference. That is, regardless whether a consumer wants Google or not. Third, entering into long term agreements with Apple, which requires Google to be the default search engine on Apple's popular Safari browser and other Apple search tools. And the fourth complaint against Google is that generally using monopoly profits to buy preferential treatment for its search engine on devices, web browsers, and other search access points. Overall, creating a continuous and self reinforcing cycle of monopolization. So, overall, the complaint highlights that these activities, along with other anti competitive practices, harm competition as well as the consumers and also reduces the ability of innovative new companies to develop, compete, and discipline Google's behavior. So, these are the explicit charges framed by the Justice Department on Google. Now, specific charges on Facebook includes acquiring rival Instagram as well as WhatsApp in order to reduce competition from the market. So, in December 2020, the US Federal Trade Commission has sued Facebook, and the complaint alleges that Facebook has engaged in a systematic strategy, including its 2012 acquisition of up and coming rival Instagram, its 2014 acquisition of WhatsApp, and also imposition of anti-competitive conditions on software developers to eliminate threats to its monopoly. Now, the US Federal Trade Commission alleges that this course of conduct by Facebook harms competition, leaves consumer with few choices for personal social networking, and also deprives advertisers of the benefits of competition. Further, the news highlights that similar charges are also framed against Amazon as well as Apple of putting rivals at disadvantage from fair competition in the market. Now, as discussed, even the European Union has framed charges against Google as well as Amazon, and it has fined Google with an antitrust fine of $10 billion. Now, the charges with respect to Amazon are first, whether Amazon favors product offers and merchants which uses their logistics and delivery system. So basically, the first charges is with respect to the fact that whether Amazon favors such products which are sold or offered through Amazon's own logistics and delivery system. And the second charge is framed against Amazon is that Amazon is accessing and analyzing real time data from other vendors who sells good on Amazon's platform. And this real-time data from other vendors helps Amazon to decide which product of its own to be launched or released and how to price as well as market them as compared to its competitors. Now, this overall results in distortion of genuine competition from the market and gives Amazon an unfair advantage in this entire deal. So these are the charges which have been leveled by European Union against Amazon. So overall, by going through these charges, we understand the kind of monopolistic behavior these four big tech companies pursues. So in this aspect, let us wait what is the legal outcome of these suits which is filed in United States as well as European Union. Now the problem here is that these monopolistic behaviors by these big tech and other companies disadvantages the consumer at large. So, in this backdrop, let us go through the disadvantages which the consumers might face in case of monopolization by these four big tech companies. These disadvantages can be said to be: first, fewer options in the market; second, monopolistic pattern of these companies can drive up the prices of the products offered by them; third, the monopolization further leads to weakening of privacy laws or privacy controls, and this is done basically by changing the terms of service or agreement by using complex language as well as ambiguous terms. And when we download an app, we are generally asked to accept all their terms and conditions, which contains these minute details in extremely complex languages as well as ambiguous terms. So, accepting all their terms and conditions without even knowing or understanding what these terms and conditions are effectively weakens privacy policy. And by making users accept all their terms and conditions, they end up holding all the data of such consumers without their consent. And this holding of data eventually results in collection of data on all aspects of users' lives, which can be used for certain objectionable uses. Now, these objectionable uses includes marketing and targeted advertising by these companies, influencing and manipulating political outcomes, targeting individuals based on particular criteria, for example, race, religion, color, etc., enabling surveillance by the governments and private agencies. Further, data compiled by these big tech companies can be used or accessed by the governments across the world for their own political motives or for racial profiling, instigating riots, genocide, etc. Now, another disadvantage for the consumer is that unprecedented market power enjoyed by such companies effectively distorts market competition or distorts fair competition in the market. And when these companies are supported by the government, such monopolization or distortion of the market is further institutionalized with the help of government support. Further, support of the government to such big tech companies further weakens data security law in the country. And according to the needs and requirements of such companies, they can put away privacy concerns of so, monopolization by these companies actually disadvantages the consumers at large. So, if a question is asked by UPSC that how does monopolization by these big tech companies disadvantages the consumers, then these are the further points which you can utilize for your answer writing. So the question remains as to why better regulation is important for Indian consumers, especially of these big tech companies. Now, the first aspect highlighted in the article is with respect to the huge population of India, and this will eventually lead to hoarding of data as these companies, namely Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, are used by billions of Indians, and all their choices, lifestyles, etc., will be collected as part of data collection exercise by these companies. So we can understand the kind of access with respect to data these companies, especially Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Apple, as well as Amazon have, including Google. And here it highlights that Google completely dominates the search engine space in India, and most smartphones in India are Android based. Now, another issue highlighted is with respect to collaboration of Facebook and Google with Geo. So it says that now even Facebook and Google are collaborating with India's largest telecom company Reliance Jio, and this will create a single gateway for Indians. So just imagine the amount of data access for Reliance Jio. And with such amount of data access, these companies can go for targeted advertising based on consumers' preferences as well as lifestyle. Now, another problem highlighted here is that we do not have our specific data protection law. Presently, the latest Data Protection Bill 2019 has run into various controversies, and so far it has not been converted into law. So, this also remains to be seen that how does the data protection law comes into place and what are the protection guaranteed under the data protection law, especially with respect to equality, liberty, as well as right to life and personal liberty, including right to privacy, which is an integral part under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Another problem highlighted is regarding the nexus between these big tech companies and the government. And as already mentioned, that such a nexus may weaken the privacy laws in India. And lastly, monopolization of tech markets will further hamper consumers' choice as consumer will be left with rather no choices and only has to depend on these few big tech companies. So based on our discussion, we can conclude by saying that India not only needs strong anti-competitive law, which India already has in the name of Competition Act 2002, but such an anti-competitive law must also be backed by a stronger privacy and data protection laws in the country so that the digital companies or the big tech companies can be regulated properly not only with respect to anti-competitive practices but also with respect to privacy concerns. Else, consumer choices and consumer rights will reduce substantially to serve unprecedented corporate greed. So this can be the conclusion with respect to our entire discussion. That Government of India not only needs strong anti-competitive law, but a strong anti-competitive law must be backed by a stronger privacy law in order to properly regulate these big tech companies having access to huge population data which can be used for various reasons. Now, this discussion becomes important primarily from the perspective of your mains examination and gets covered under GS Paper 1, GS Paper 2, as well as GS Paper 3. Now, in GS Paper 1, this topic gets covered under effects of globalization on Indian society. Paper 2, it gets covered under statutory and regulatory bodies, namely CCI, that is Competition Commission of India. And in paper 3, it gets covered under various aspects and developments related to technology, including challenges of internal security through communication networks, role of media and social networking sites in internal security challenges, as well as basics of cybersecurity.